Imagine having a 7-minute conversation with a version of yourself that is 30 years older. One that remembers your children, has lived through the decisions you are still making today, and can tell you, in your own voice and with your own face, whether any of it was worth it. This is not science fiction. Researchers built exactly this system and ran a randomized controlled experiment on 92 real participants, testing whether text, voice, or a photorealistic avatar of your aged self produces the greatest psychological impact. But to understand why the results matter, you first need to understand the strange way your brain relates to time. Here is the core issue, and it is stranger than it first appears. When researchers used fMRI technology to compare neural patterns in people thinking about their current selves, their future selves, and strangers, they found that thinking about the future self-produced patterns most similar to thinking about another person, not the self. In other words, on a brain level, your future self already looks like a stranger. This psychological gap has a formal name: future self continuity, the degree to which you feel connected to who you will eventually become. Research has shown that high future self continuity promotes better saving behavior, academic performance, mental health, and subjective quality of life. The inverse is also true. A weak connection to your future self consistently predicts worse long-term decision-making across every domain studied. This is the problem the researchers wanted to solve, and they had a specific hypothesis about how AI might close that gap. The system they built is called Future You, and it works in 4 stages that build on one another. First, users complete a structured biographical intake: goals, relationships, values, and future aspirations, which the system uses to construct a personalized backstory, a plausible autobiography of who you might become by age 60. From that backstory, the AI generates what the researchers call synthetic memories. Not predictions of what will happen, but plausible memories your future self would have, grounded entirely in the life data you provided. Finally, the system renders an age-progressed image of your face, clones and ages your voice, and synchronizes both into a photorealistic avatar you can speak to in real time. Each conversation lasts approximately 7 minutes. The researchers tested 3 versions of this interface against a neutral control in a randomized controlled trial: a text-only chatbot, a voice-only agent, and the full photorealistic avatar, measuring outcomes across future self-continuity, emotional well-being, and motivation. The first and most important finding was that every version of the system worked. All 3 modalities, text, voice, and avatar, significantly improved future self-continuity, emotional well-being, and forward motivation compared to participants in the control condition, who showed no meaningful change. To appreciate what that kind of shift can actually do in the real world, a field study involving nearly 50,000 retirement savers in Mexico found that simply showing banking customers an age-progressed photo of themselves, no conversation, no AI, led to a 16% increase in the number who made voluntary contributions to their retirement accounts. A single perceptual nudge, no dialogue required. The avatar condition in the new study produced the largest gains in experiential vividness, that raw sense of confronting your aged face. Yet when the researchers measured the outcomes that matter most, hope, well-being, and continuity scores, there was no statistically significant difference between the text, voice, and avatar interfaces. Format, in other words, did not determine the outcome. What did predict the outcome was the quality of the conversation itself. The researchers found that interaction quality metrics, specifically persuasiveness, realism, and user engagement, were the strongest predictors of psychological and emotional gains. And in a direct model comparison, Claude 4 outperformed ChatGPT 3.5, Llama 4, and Qwen 3 across every psychological dimension they measured. The improvement when migrating from ChatGPT 3.5 to Claude 4 represented a 40.8% gain in aggregate user experience metrics, not because of visual fidelity or acoustic realism, but because of the texture and coherence of how the system engaged with the person. What the brain appears to be responding to in these interactions is not the spectacle of seeing itself aged, but the experience of feeling genuinely understood by something that claims to be its own future. The researchers found that the more real the conversation felt, the stronger the psychological effect, which raises a simple question worth sitting with. If the future self that changed you was constructed by an AI, how much of that change was actually yours? If this made you think, please like and subscribe. It really helps with the channel. Thanks for watching.